Alibaba triples live translation coverage with voice cloning. Pairaphrase locks down K-12 data privacy across 16 states, and IntBot sparks the multilingual physical AI revolution. Welcome to Locanuku.com, localization news you can use. Imagine stepping off a humid, incredibly crowded street in Singapore and walking right into one of the major transit hubs. It is absolute chaos. You've got the roar of the trains, overlapping PA announcements echoing off the concrete, and a literal sea of commuters moving in every possible direction. Now imagine a humanoid robot navigating through that exact crowd. It's not slow or clunky. It isn't confused by the noise. It smoothly approaches a lost commuter, registers their confusion, and instantly engages them in perfectly natural Mandarin. A second later, it turns to a tourist and switches flawlessly to English, and then to Tamil for a local vendor. This isn't a pre-rendered video at a tech summit. This is happening right now, live on the actual concourse. It fundamentally breaks your brain the first time you see it in the wild. We've spent our entire careers thinking of localization as something that happens on a glowing rectangle, a phone screen, a web browser, or a PDF. But out there on that concourse, dealing with spatial awareness, ambient noise, and immediate human stress, that is an entirely different operational reality. IntBot, a developer building social intelligence layers for embodied AI, just partnered with Certus Group in Singapore to deploy these multilingual humanoid robots into high-traffic public spaces, hospitals, and transit hubs. We have to stop calling language a feature in this context. What we are actually witnessing is the paradigm shift toward physical AI. Historically, our industry operated at the absolute tail end of the product lifecycle. A company would build the hardware, design the software logic, create the UI, and then right before launch, they'd extract a JSON file of text strings and just toss it over the wall to a localization team. But when you're deploying a physical robot into a public hospital, language isn't an add-on. It is the primary user interface. If that machine can't fluently and empathetically communicate with a highly diverse, multilingual population in real time, its hardware is totally useless. Localization has been forcefully relocated from the end of the deployment pipeline directly into the core operating system. If you manage a localization program, this introduces a completely terrifying new frontier of quality assurance. How on earth do you QA a robot's cultural body language? It's one thing to run an automated check to ensure English text was accurately translated into Tagalog, but these are physical agents moving their limbs in public. What if the robot's physical gesture is deeply offensive in a specific target culture? Let's say the AI wants to tell a user to step forward. It uses a come here gesture, palm up, curling its index finger. In the US, that is totally standard. But if that robot is deployed in the Philippines, that exact same gesture is specifically used for dogs. It's considered profoundly insulting to use on a human being. Are localization professionals now responsible for debugging the physical kinematics of a robotic arm? The undeniable answer is yes. Multimodal localization means we are no longer just localizing text or audio, we are localizing physical behavior. The social intelligence layer has to be hyper-aware of spatial proxemics. The acceptable personal distance changes drastically between Tokyo and Buenos Aires. Language service providers are going to have to start auditing the physical behavior matrix of these machines, which means we need tools that can handle real-time multimodal processing without lagging. A robot can't pause for 5 seconds to calculate cultural proxemics before answering a simple question. It would look broken. And speaking of the sheer speed required for real-time communication, look at what Alibaba's Qwen team just dropped. Qwen 3.5 Live Translate Flash. They expanded this model to cover 60 languages, up from 18. But the real headline is real-time voice cloning coupled with a speech-to-speech per token latency of just 2.8 seconds. That 2.8 second threshold completely changes the game. Anyone who has worked in simultaneous speech translation knows the classic catch-22. Choice A. The system waits longer to ingest more audio to guarantee higher accuracy, creating an incredibly awkward, unnatural pause. Choice B. The system translates immediately based on the first few words, keeping the conversation flowing but massively increasing the risk of a catastrophic translation error. Alibaba bypassed this bottleneck with a thinker-talker architecture. To understand it, think about a busy airport air traffic control tower. In a traditional AI model, you have one single controller trying to look at the radar, talk to pilots, calculate wind speeds, and assign runways all by themselves. It's a massive cognitive bottleneck. Alibaba split the tower in half. The thinker component is the radar analyst. It listens to the incoming multilingual audio, breaks it down into small semantic chunks, and extracts the pure meaning. It instantly hands that raw semantic intent to the talker component, which doesn't have to think about meaning at all. Its sole job is to clear the runway and generate the localized speech output. By decoupling the understanding engine from the speaking engine, they drastically cut the processing overhead, and it performs real-time voice cloning, mathematically preserving the original speaker's vocal timbre and pitch across the language barrier. But the most important element for enterprise localization in this release is support for up to 1,000 dynamic hot words. This separates consumer toys from enterprise infrastructure. For a global enterprise, raw fluency without terminology control is an absolute liability. Imagine you're localizing a live training stream for surgical robotics. The instructor explains the mechanics using a highly specific medical term, bipolar cautery. If a fluid, creative AI dynamically translates that into a generic two-sided burning tool because it sounds more conversational, it's a disaster. The surgical schematic is ruined. The hot word feature allows localization managers to dynamically lock bipolar cautery to its exact scientifically vetted translation in real time. The AI can be fluid with conversational filler, but it is mathematically forced to inject the approved terminology for critical concepts. This control extends far beyond audio. Microsoft just released MAI Image 2.5, which evaluators rank as the #3 image generator globally. We care about this because it has seemingly solved the text rendering problem. Historically, diffusion models have been terrible at typography. If you asked an older AI for a stop sign, you'd get a red octagon with alien hallucinated gibberish. But MAI Image 2.5 has bridged that gap in the latent space and can accurately render specific text within the generated pixels. Imagine managing a localized marketing campaign for a restaurant launching in Paris. The old workflow meant taking a stock photo, handing it to a graphic designer, and paying them to manually Photoshop the translated French daily specials onto a chalkboard. Today, you prompt the AI to generate a Parisian sidewalk cafe and instruct it to render plat du jour natively into the chalk texture. The modern professional is no longer just translating a string of text. They are orchestrating holistic scene generation. Data for AI, English bias, and the new economics of localization. But to deliver those results, the foundation models must overcome a systemic structural flaw, English bias. Slater's new Data for AI market report projects this market will explode to $21.5 billion by 2031. Silicon Valley has scraped all the high-quality public data on the internet. Now they need proprietary, legally clean, expert-crafted data, and language solutions integrators are perfectly positioned to dominate this sector. Generating this data involves alignment datasets and adversarial datasets. Alignment is training the model's behavior, like hiring an HR consultant to teach corporate etiquette. Adversarial red teaming is inherently destructive, like hiring a white hat hacker to break into your server room. If a social media platform deploys a content moderation AI, it might perfectly catch English slurs. But if a malicious actor uses deep Brazilian Portuguese street slang from the Pichação graffiti culture to imply a threat, the AI completely misses it, assuming it's harmless street poetry. You cannot patch a cultural vulnerability by adding GPU compute power. You must hire linguistic experts to role-play as bad actors, attack the model using highly localized manipulation tactics, and feed that structured data back to the engineers. It is cybersecurity through linguistics. This was the inescapable theme at SlaterCon London 2026. Over 250 C-suite leaders gathered to analyze a global market now valued at $30.85 billion. Ali Stott from RWS and Tom Cockney from Cohere made it clear that raw model power is no longer the differentiator for Language Weaver Pro. The differentiator is the surrounding architecture, compliance, and real-time guardrails. We heard the same on the Voice AI panel with Gradium, Poly AI, and Audio Stack. Voice is rapidly overtaking text as the primary interface. Most importantly, enterprise buyers are abandoning volume metrics. Nobody cares if you translated 7 million words when AI can do it in an hour. Buyers are measuring direct business ROI, how hyper-localized content increases regional conversion rates or reduces call center tickets. Stefan Singino from Accolade brilliantly argued we must detach from traditional production methods and focus on the outcome. It is like transitioning from gas cars to electric vehicles. The outcome, driving 70 miles per hour to work, is the same, but the underlying mechanics have completely changed from spark plugs to a giant battery. The industry must stop stubbornly defending the old mechanics. This industrialization of language tech unlocks massive projects like SK Bioscience executing a $260 million technology transfer agreement with VCall to establish local vaccine manufacturing in Colombia. That requires localizing strict regulatory manuals and facilitating high-stakes multilingual engineering communication. But what does this lived reality feel like for the practitioners? The illusion of LLM fluency is incredibly dangerous. LLMs construct grammatically flawless sentences, but beneath that polished surface, their terminology choices are often hallucinatory guesses. When an AI produces beautifully flowing prose, it lulls the human reviewer into a false sense of security. It's like buying a stunning multi-million-dollar mansion only to discover the foundation is poured over a massive sinkhole. Fixing this requires intense context engineering to combat morphological mismatch. Imagine translating a software manual referencing a curtain wall, a specific architectural term for a non-structural outer covering. Without constraints, the AI might look at the words curtain and wall and output a beautiful translation of silk drapery hanging on a bedroom partition. The linguistic translation is accurate, but the professional register is entirely poisoned. The 100-meter sprint and the auditor problem. This redefines the daily workflow into what's being called the 100-meter sprint. The AI explodes off the block and sprints the first 98 meters instantly. The professional translator's entire job is a violent, highly technical, incredibly stressful fight for the last 2 meters. You are reading cryptic CI/CD job logs, which track the continuous integration and deployment of code to see why an AI-translated variable broke the software build. You are auditing translated primitives inside massive code repositories. We are no longer just translators. We have evolved into multilingual data architects, which leaves us with a massive existential question. If autonomous agents like Locadex are embedding into code bases and humans are building the pipelines to catch the errors in those final 2 meters, what happens when the AI agents become advanced enough to write, audit, and optimize their own localization pipelines? Who audits the auditor? Before we get into the final takeaways, just a reminder that you can find more practical insights like this at locanuku.com. Let's summarize the key actionable insights from today. First, language is becoming native infrastructure. Whether it's humanoid robots in Singapore, Alibaba's real-time voice cloning, or General Translation's code-embedded agents, you must prepare your localization programs for real-time multimodal deployment. Second, governance is your absolute competitive advantage. With massive public sector moves like Pairapphrase's K-12 data privacy agreements and strict legislation like the EU AI Act, the ability to provide verified, secure, and legally defensible language data is far more valuable than raw translation speed. Finally, the role of the localization professional has fundamentally transformed into a multilingual data architect. Surviving the industry requires mastering context engineering, auditing complex data structures, and actively combating English bias through adversarial red teaming. And that's your daily dose of localization know-how from locanuku.com, localization news you can use.